Chapter 1: Echoes of the Shattered World. The wind, a relentless sculptor of ruin, howled its dirge across the skeletal remains of what was once a city. Rust-colored dust, fine as ash from a forgotten pyre, coated everything. The jagged teeth of skyscrapers gnawed clean by some unseen leviathan. The skeletal frameworks of airships impaled on their own masts. The gnarled vines of parasitic flora strangling ancient aqueducts. This was the Hundredth World, a grim testament to the Demon Prince's insatiable ambition, now reduced to a twisted mockery of its former steam-powered glory. The very air tasted of ozone and despair, a metallic tang that clung to the tongue, a constant reminder of the alien devastation. Before the scourge, the air here had hummed with the symphony of gears and turbines, of electric carriages gliding on elevated tracks, of clockwork automatons tending to sprawling vertical farms. The sky had been a canvas for gleaming dirigibles and intricate ornithopters, their brass and copper hulls catching the sun, casting intricate shadows on the bustling thoroughfares below. Innovation had been the heartbeat of this world, a relentless march forward fueled by the ingenious fusion of steam power and arcane principles, a delicate balance between engineering and the whispers of unseen energies. Now, the only sound was the omnipresent shriek of the wind, punctuated by the distant, guttural roars that spoke of the new masters. Black, oily ichor, slick and viscous, stained the once gleaming brass and copper, seeping into the very foundations, a pervasive rot that marked the land as conquered. Strange, geometric spires, scabrous and dark as basalt, now punctured the skyline. Demon towers vomited forth from the very portals that had opened the world to its doom. Their vile energies pulsed with a sickening rhythm, casting an unnatural, sickly purple glow on the ravaged landscape, a baleful beacon of the conqueror's dominion that stretched to the distant, bleeding horizon. Below, amidst the debris-choked thoroughfares that snaked between the leaning husks of buildings, a small group moved with the haunted stealth of prey. Their breath plumed in the chill air, each exhale a fragile testament to life in a world determined to claim it. Their clothes were patched and grimy, faces etched with the twin tolls of fear and exhaustion, like masks carved from hardened grief. They were like ghosts traversing a graveyard, clinging to a desperate hope, their every step a silent prayer against discovery. At the head of the ragged column walked Dreyfuss. He might have been in his late 30s, but the deep lines etched around his eyes and the permanent shadow beneath them suggested a weariness far beyond his years. His frame was lean, almost gaunt, yet held with an unconscious tension that hinted at a coiled, dangerous strength. He moved with a predatory grace, each footfall precise, silent, as if he were part of the very shadows he sought. A long, wrapped object, the size of a claymore, rested across his back, secured by worn leather straps. It was swathed in heavy, dark canvas, concealing its true nature, though its ominous length was undeniable. He never spoke of it, nor did he ever unsheath it. It was a silent, menacing presence, a mystery that none dared to question, a dark secret that he carried heavier than any physical burden. His gaze, distant and heavy, constantly swept the broken horizon, searching for threats or, perhaps, simply for a flicker of something other than despair. There was a raw, untamed quality to him, like a wild animal that had learned to survive by instinct alone. Sometimes, when he thought no one was watching, a profound sadness would momentarily eclipse the stoicism in his eyes, a glimpse into a soul deeply wounded. Close behind him, her eyes wide with a mixture of apprehension and unwavering determination, was Astra. Younger, perhaps in her early 20s, her face was smudged with dirt and soot, her once vibrant hair now a tangled mess of chestnut brown, but her spirit, though battered, remained stubbornly bright. Her movements were careful, her focus sharp, her senses constantly alert. She clutched a worn satchel to her side, a receptacle of scavenged necessities. Crude bandages, a few dried herbs she knew by sight, a rusted tin for boiling water, and a small, smooth river stone she kept for comfort. She had found Dreyfuss half dead, abandoned to the elements after some unknown calamity, and nursed him back from the brink with a fierce, quiet tenacity. He had been a broken man, ravaged by injuries and a grief that seemed to consume him from within. Slowly, carefully, she had coaxed him back to life, forming an unspoken bond that superseded their words. She had lost everything, her family, her home, her innocence, to the same encroaching darkness that had consumed the world, a grief that settled deep within her, often masked by a fierce practicality and a stubborn refusal to yield. Her compassion was a rare, precious thing in this desolate landscape, a flame she guarded fiercely. She often found herself watching Dreyfuss, a quiet concern in her eyes, wondering about the burdens he carried, burdens he never shared. The rest of their group consisted of a dwindling handful of souls, each with their own unseen scars, each clinging to a shred of hope that this journey might lead them to salvation. There was old man Borin, a grizzled prospector whose back was permanently bowed from a lifetime spent hunched over rock faces, but whose knowledge of forgotten paths and hidden nooks was invaluable in this treacherous landscape. His face was a roadmap of wrinkles, his eyes milky with age, yet they held a spark of knowing, an ancient wisdom born of years spent under the indifferent sky. He limped along, muttering to himself about how things used to be, how the rivers ran clear and the mountains sang, a living relic of a bygone era, his complaints a bizarre comfort in their predictability. He was often seen cleaning a collection of strange, brass-rimmed lenses, relics from his prospecting days. Lyra and Kale, a young couple barely out of their teens, clung to each other like wilting vines, their faces pale with constant fear. Yet their shared touch was a tiny, defiant spark against the encroaching desolation. Lyra, with her delicate features and wide, frightened eyes, often pulled her threadbare shawl tighter, as if to ward off the chill that had settled deep in her bones. Kale, a little older, tried to project an air of protectiveness, his arm always around her, though his own fear was barely concealed in the tremor of his hands. They were survivors by sheer will, their love a fragile shield against the horrors they had witnessed. They represented the most vulnerable members of the group, their innocence stripped away far too soon. Jaren, a former mechanic from one of the great clockwork cities, still tinkered with anything he could scavenge. His calloused hands, scarred by grease and heat, were always busy, examining a broken gear, polishing a piece of tarnished brass, or attempting to repair a sputtering steam lamp. He was a man of logic and practicality, his mind always seeking solutions, a desperate attempt to find order in the chaos. He rarely spoke, preferring the companionship of silent cogs and springs, finding a strange comfort in their predictable movements. His goggles, pushed up onto his brow, were perpetually smudged, relics of a life that no longer existed. He carried a heavy satchel of tools, each one meticulously cared for, a small island of normalcy in a sea of destruction. And then there were the three children, Lyra, the eldest at 7, with a quiet intensity in her dark eyes that belied her age. Finn, a perpetually curious 5-year-old, whose small hand rarely left Lyra's side. And little Pip, a tiny, wide-eyed toddler who seemed to float through the wreckage on a cloud of unknowing, often carried by Astra or Lyra. They were too young to truly comprehend the permanence of the destruction, but old enough to sense the pervasive terror in the air, the constant tension in the adults around them. They moved silently, eyes darting, their small hands clutching tightly to the adults, their innocence the most fragile thing in this ruined world. They rarely laughed, their childhood stolen by the ever-present threat of the monstrous, distorted figures that stalked the ruins, their nightmares filled with shadows and guttural snarls. Their destination was a whispered legend, a beacon of hope in a world choked by shadow, a hidden settlement in the mountains. Rumors, spread by desperate wanderers and fleeting whispers, spoke of a place built by survivors, a bastion against the tide of darkness, nestled deep within the crags where the demon's flying monstrosities struggled to reach. It was said to be powered by ingeniously repurposed steam technology, its defenses formidable, its inhabitants united. It was a perilous journey, fraught with unseen traps, roving demon patrols, and the ever-present threat of starvation. They had lost so many already, devoured by grotesque creatures that emerged from the shadows of crumbling buildings, crushed by collapsing rubble that rained down like deadly hail, or simply succumbing to the gnawing despair that ate at the spirit, leaving them hollow shells. Each loss was a fresh wound, a phantom limb that ached with every step, but the promise of sanctuary, of a place where they might finally rest, kept them moving, one agonizing step after another. They had been traveling for days through the labyrinthine ruins, keeping to the shadows of collapsed structures, moving only when the low, crimson sun cast long, obscuring shadows. The air grew thinner as they ascended, the ruined cityscape gradually giving way to the jagged, demon-scoured foothills. The mountains themselves, once verdant and imposing, now bore the same black scars as the cities, but offered more cover, more places to hide amongst their craggy faces and deep ravines. Steam vents hissed intermittently from fissures in the rock, a reminder of the raw, untamed power that still lay beneath the scarred earth. As dusk began to paint the sky in hues of bruised purple and bleeding orange, casting an ethereal, melancholic glow over the desolation, Dreyfuss held up a hand, his gaze fixed on something in the distance. The group froze, breath catching in their throats, every muscle tensing. A glint of unnatural light, like polished obsidian, flickered between the skeletal remains of two colossal steam generators, their rusted frames reaching like skeletal fingers towards the bruised sky. It moved with an unnatural speed, a blur against the deepening twilight, darting through the debris with an unsettling, non-organic fluidity. "Demonic scout," Dreyfuss whispered, his voice a low rasp, barely audible above the rising wind. He didn't need to specify. The term itself was enough to trigger a cold dread that gripped them all. These were the vanguard, the eyes and ears of the demon legions, swift and merciless. His hand instinctively went to the hilt of the sheathed sword on his back, a familiar, almost unconscious gesture, his knuckles white as he gripped the canvas-wrapped hilt. His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek. Panic, cold and sharp, ripped through the small group. Kale gasped, pulling Lyra closer, his body instinctively trying to shield her. One of the children, little Pip, whimpered, burying her face into Astra's side. Old man Borin fumbled for a rusty, single-shot pistol he kept tucked into his belt, his hands trembling. Jaren's eyes, usually so focused, darted wildly, searching for an escape route, a piece of cover that wasn't there. The scout, now closer, was revealed to be a horrifying construct of shadow and jagged bone, its form shifting and reforming as it moved, its head a mere suggestion of a skull, its limbs too long, too spindly. It chittered, a sound like chitons scraping on rock, its single, glowing red eye sweeping their position. It had seen them. They were exposed, caught in the open amongst the ruins, with little more than broken walls for cover. The cold dread turned to ice in their veins. Dreyfuss's eyes, usually so devoid of expression, hardened, focusing with an almost frightening intensity. His body seemed to coil, preparing for a spring. "Run!" he commanded, his voice suddenly sharp, cutting through the rising fear like a shard of ice. "Hide! Now!" He shoved Astra roughly towards a collapsed wall, gesturing frantically with his head towards a narrow crevice between two immense, toppled turbines. "Take the children. Go. I'll buy you time." He didn't wait for a response, didn't spare a glance backward. As the first chittering cries of the scout echoed through the desolate air, Dreyfuss moved, pulling a rusted length of pipe from the ground, his silhouette outlined against the bruised twilight. His stance was low, ready, a desperate guardian facing down an insurmountable tide, the sheathed sword on his back a silent, unyielding presence. The scout was already closing in, a blur of malevolence, its unholy shriek filling the night.